Hello, my dear listeners. Today we are here to read the next part of our uh, journey in the life of Sri Ramkrishna Paramhansa. So, let's proceed. Today, the chapter name is Haladhari. So, even I have to dig in because this chapter name is not giving us any known vibe. Only one vibe, that Haladhar. This is a name, and let's see what it signifies. At this time, there came to Dakshineshwar another man who was to be closely connected with the life of Sri Ramakrishna for a period of 8 years. His name was Ram Tarak, or more familiarly Haladhari, who lived at Dakshineshwar probably from 1858 to 1866. He was a cousin of Sri Ramakrishna. Being the eldest son of Khudiram's youngest brother, he came to Dakshineshwar in search of employment, and Mathur, knowing him to be related to Sri Ramakrishna, was glad to engage him in the worship of Mother Kali till his cousin recovered from his divine madness. Haladhari was well versed in the Srimad Bhagavata and Adhyatma Ramayana, and was a master of the Gita and Vedanta. Though a devotee of Vishnu, he undertook at the request of Mathur to worship Kali. As he insisted on cooking his own food on the bank of the Ganges, Mathur remarked, "Why are you so particular? Sri Ramakrishna and your nephew Hriday do not object to taking the food offered to the Divine Mother." To this Haladhari replied, "My cousin has attained a certain state of realization and he can do so. But as I have not yet reached that state, in my case it would be a sin." Mathur was pleased at this straightforward answer and allowed him to do as he pleased. Haladhari could not bear to see the animal sacrifice in the Kali temple. After nearly a month's service, he was meditating one evening when Kali appeared to him and told him to leave the temple, and that as a result of his half hearted worship he would soon lose his son. Shortly afterwards, Haladhari's son died. After telling the entire circumstances to Sri Ramakrishna, he took up the service of Radha Govinda instead. Haladhari belonged to that degraded cult of the Vaishnavas which, trying to practice the Madhura Bhava in its extreme form, does so not through meditation as it should, but through secret relations with women. The matter soon leaked out, and people began to whisper about it among themselves, though none dared to accuse him publicly lest he should curse them. And there was a current belief that his curses always came true. When, however, the news reached the ears of Sri Ramakrishna, he, in his outspoken manner, spoke to Haladhari of what was being said about him and his practices. This infuriated Haladhari, who said, "You are my cousin and younger, and yet you dare to slight me thus? As a punishment for this, blood will come out of your mouth." Though Sri Ramakrishna tried to appease him, saying that his object is warning him was to save him from criticism, Haladhari remained unmoved and did not retract his words. Now that the Kali temple and its accommodations became known, many sadhus used Dakshineshwar as a halting place on their way to Ganga Sagar. It is probable that from someone of this Sri Ramakrishna learned the secrets of Hatha Yoga, which he now practiced. One evening, soon after the above incident, He felt an irritating sensation in his palate, which after a minute began to bleed. Sri Ramakrishna described the incident. The color of the blood was dark like the juice of bean leaves. It was so thick that only a little portion fell to the ground, and the rest clotted and hung like a rope from my teeth. I pressed one end of my cloth against the place to stop the bleeding, but without success. I was sorely perplexed. Many people gathered round me. Haladhari too came in, all haste from his evening services. I told him, weeping, "See, cousin, what you have done to me by your curse." Seeing me in such a plight, he too began to weep. Fortunately, at that time there was staying in the Kali temple a sadhu who, hearing of the incident, came and examined the color of the blood and the place from which it came. He said, "Thank God, there is no cause for anxiety. This hemorrhage has done you great good. I see you were practicing yoga. This opened your Sushumna canal, and a quantity of blood was rushing to the head. It is excellent that this blood, instead of reaching the brain, made a passage through the palate, or you would have entered the Jada Samadhi, from which you could never again come down to the plane of ordinary consciousness. It must be that the Divine Mother has some great mission to be done through you, and she has saved your body." I was reassured by his words and was at peace. Being an orthodox Brahmin with great respect for the traditions of the Chatterjee family, Haladhari could not bring himself to justify the peculiar ways of Sri Ramakrishna. Though he lived with his cousin during the stormiest period of his sadhana, yet being book bound, he grossly misunderstood his cousin's exalted spiritual state and naturally concluded, like other people, that his actions were more the outcome of a deranged brain than of any high spiritual realization. Not having the breadth of vision which would enable him to look at things in their proper perspective, he would sometimes say to Hriday, "Look here, Hriday, it is really a blot on Ramkrishna's character that he has given up the sacred trade. Again, it is not awkward that he should remain naked before all. It is exceptionally good fortune to be born a Brahmin, yet you see how Ramkrishna slights his rare privilege. I don't see that he has attained to such a high state of spiritual exaltation that he can afford to make light of the caste observances or so recklessly. He does not take anybody's advice, excepting yours to a certain extent. You ought to see that his actions are more orthodox. In my opinion, you should use force even to prevent him from repeating these profanities." But at times, his ideas about Sri Ramakrishna would change. If perchance he were present when the Master was in the sanctum of the Divine Mother, he would be struck at the sight of his cousin's unique devotion and earnestness and passionate prayers. Seeing this divine fervor, a thing of which he had had no experience in spite of his book learning, Haladhari would revise his opinions and find an excuse for the inconsistencies. Then he would run to Hriday and say, "Ah, you must have seen something divine in Ramkrishna. Otherwise, how could you serve him with such constancy?" Hriday, a somehow changed man now, would answer with a smile, "Yes, you are right, uncle. Don't you see? I could not bring myself to serve others in such menial ways. So Haladhari was tossed between doubt and partial conviction regarding his cousin's state of mind. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, many a time, Haladhari, being struck by my devotion and zeal, would say, Ramkrishna, this time I have found you out. I would retort, take care that you do not get confused again. You cannot deceive me any more. He would reply, surely the Lord is manifesting himself through you. I would smile and say, let us hope so. We live and learn. But while studying in leisure hours, some such book as the Bhagavata or Adhyatma Ramayana, with the occasional stimulation of snuff, he would again be inflated with pride, throwing all humility to the winds. He would assume an air of great superiority, look at the world as a mere mud puddle, arrogate to himself the position of a great scholar, and thrust his opinions upon all. Sometimes I went to him and said, what you have read in the scriptures, I have realized in life, so I can understand the import of the Shastras. Haladhari would flare up and reply in a swaggering tone, go to, you are an egregious fool that you should say that you understand these absurd things. I would reply, believe me, the divinity that you acknowledged to be residing in me teaches me everything. At this, Haladhari would become frantic with rage and reply, how foolish! What scripture teaches that God would incarnate himself again in the Kali Yuga except when he comes in the person of Kalki? You have verily become insane, or how could you entertain such thoughts? I would remind him with a smile, why did you not say a few hours ago that there would be no further confusion in your mind about me? But Haladhari would not be in the mood to listen to it then. We had many repetitions of this amusing scene. Then one day, as he saw me sitting naked on a branch of the banyan tree in the Panchavati, he was thoroughly convinced that I had been possessed by a Brahmadaitya. Haladhari, we have said, was a Vaishnava, and ever since the death of his child through the curse of Kali, he came to look upon the goddess as being of a tamasika or dire nature. One day he even remarked to Sri Ramakrishna, can one get spiritual elevation by worshipping a tamashika form? Why do you bestow so much attention on the worship of Kali? Sri Ramakrishna did not answer him then, but he was pained at the disrespect shown to his favorite deity. He at once went to Kali temple and asked the Divine Mother with tearful eyes, Mother, Haladhari is a scholar, versed in scriptures, and he says thou art possessed of tamasika attributes. Art thou really so? The mother herself enlightened him on the point. With a heart full of joy, he ran to Haladhari, who was engaged in the worship of Radha Govinda. Excited, he at once climbed on his shoulder and exclaimed again and again, dare you call my mother Tamashika? Is she? No, she is everything. She has all the three gunas. Again, she is full of sattva alone. Sri Ramakrishna's divine touch illuminated Haladhari's heart. The scales fell, as it were, from his eyes. In a moment he understood the folly of his remarks, realized his own littleness. He bowed his head in reverent submission, found in Sri Ramakrishna the manifestation of the Mother of the universe, and talking and taking flowers and sandal paste, made an offering at his holy feet. Shortly after, Hriday met him and asked how it was that he stopped to worship Sri Ramakrishna specially Sorry, I must repeat the sentence. Shortly after, Hriday met him and asked how it was that he stooped to worshipped Sri Ramakrishna, especially as he believed him to be insane and possessed by an evil spirit. Oh, I can't tell you how, replied Haladhari. On returning from the Kali temple, he overwhelmed me altogether. I forgot everything and saw in him the clear manifestation of divinity. Whenever I visit him in the Kali temple, he has that kind of influence over me. Really, it is a mystery which I cannot solve. So, in rare moments of illumination, Haladhari saw divinity in his cousin, but he forgot this when he went back to his books. Haladhari's conduct confirms the truth of the master's statement that books are but knots on the heart. They stifle our cravings for God realization. The reader already knows that beggars used to be fed at the Kali temple. One day, Sri Ramakrishna, like the true Vedantin, that he was, ate a little of their leavings, considering these poor people as veritable representations of the Lord. When Haladhari saw him doing so, he, being an orthodox man, was upset and said, "What are you doing? You have lost caste. Now who will marry you? Who will marry your daughters in future?" This, this incongruous words from the lips of a professed Vedantin like Haladhari roused the indignation of Sri Ramakrishna, who exclaimed, "You rogue! Do you not always quote from the scriptures to say that the world is an illusion and God is the only reality, and and glibly recommend people to look upon all beings as Brahman? And you think that I like you would preach that the world is a myth and at the same time have children? Fie upon your knowledge of the scriptures." One day, Haladhari cast asp- aspers. One day, Haladhari cast aspersion, aspersions on the truth of Sri Ramakrishna's God visions and said on the authority of the scriptures that God is beyond the reach of the human mind. That gave rise to grave doubts in the mind of Sri Ramakrishna. He thus described his feelings and the subsequent experience to one of his disciples, Swami Premananda. I asked myself the question, are the various divine visions which I have had and the words I have heard from the lips of the Mother herself all false? Have they been mere fancies of my mind? Is it that I have been fooled by the Divine Mother? To me, the very thought was painful and blasphemous. I was greatly perplexed. With sobs, I prayed to the Mother, "How how couldst thou have the heart to deceive me like that because I was a fool?" A stream of tears flowed from my eyes. Shortly after, I saw something like a volume of mist rising from the floor and filling the space before me. In the midst, in the midst of it appeared a fair face, calm and highly expressive, with a flowing beard. Fixing its steady gaze upon me, the figure solemnly said, "Well, remain on the threshold of relative consciousness." Repeating this thrice, the face gently disappeared in the mist, which also dissolved. This vision reassured me. Another day, such a doubt, and that too owing to the confusing arguments of Haladhari, crossed his mind. On that occasion, too, the master, as he sat down to worship, begged of the mother to dissolve it. She appeared before him in the form of a certain woman known as Rati's mother beside the sacred jar used in worship and repeated the same word. A third time he heard the same voice after he had come down from the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, but of this later. So, my dear friends, today we are going to conclude this chapter here only. And from this chapter, I must say, sometimes few people comes into our lives to just rectify or just to uh, though they by their doings they present in our life, they introduce too many exams, too many hurdles, but still I think they are for rectifying us, for fine tuning, for the best, to bring out our best, to bring out the doubts which we have and we didn't know or we were not aware of it, so that we can clear our doubts, and so we can become more and more conscious, more and more what should I say, more and more we become a better us or better me than the yesterday, so that we can become successful in our journey towards meeting the Paramatman or Param Brahma or Brahma, whatever the name we can give, or the mother goddess or divine divinity, whatever it is. So with this I must say thank you for being with me, thank you for supporting me in all ups and downs, and please be safe, be happy. Shubhamastu.